So we know that 52% of men over the age of 40 suffer from erectile dysfunction, some degree. 52% of men. Even if you take conservative numbers, that's 30 million men in the U.S. suffer from this disease.
And how are we defining it? Is it one time I had too much to drink and I couldn't get an erection, or how do we think about it?
Great. So what we use is a questionnaire, a validated questionnaire called the IIEF. And this questionnaire, there's several forms, but there's a shorter version with 6 questions. And essentially, based on those numbers, you can tell if someone has mild, moderate, or severe ED. So when they gave the original study in 1994, that when it came out, 52% of men over the age of 40 had some degree of erectile dysfunction. And you talked about aging, but it's very interesting. On that graph, 40% of men at 40 had some degree of ED, 50% at 50, 60% at 60, 70% at 70. So it's an easy way to remember what percentage of men suffer from ED. Now, it's not necessarily aging, I think, that causes the ED. I think it's the acquisition of comorbid conditions as we get older, and we'll talk about that. But again, it's a prevalent condition. Think about women. I treat a lot of women for sexual dysfunction. 43% of women in the United States suffer from some degree of sexual dysfunction. 30% of men in the U.S. have some degree of premature ejaculation or ejaculatory dysfunction. 7 to 9% of men have Peyronie's disease. So this
How many?
7 to 9% of men in the U.S. have Peyronie's disease.
Which we should set aside time to talk about.
And they don't. But the problem is that this population, I call it suffer in silence.
Yeah,
they
that's
never
what I was gonna
talk
ask
about
you.
it.
Yeah.
They never talk about it. In fact, there are many studies showing they're completely silent. They don't seek care. And the issue is it has a significant impact on their quality of life, right? So we know that a third of men who have ED have suffered from depression because of their ED. 37% of men who have ED have anxiety because of their ED. We know that it causes impairment in quality of a relationship between a couple. And if you look at quality of life scores, they're significantly impaired in men who suffer from sexual dysfunction.
And so when you said suffering in silence, you weren't just referring to Peyronie's disease. You're talking about all sexual dysfunction.
All sexual dysfunction. So there's reasons for that. So one is, if you look at surveys, I got to bring this up because it was a great survey that came out last year. 1,500 men surveyed between the ages of 18 and 80, and they asked about their mental, physical, and sexual health. So in my world, it's mental, physical, and sexual health. It's a triad, not mental and physical.
Yep.
And they're all related. But the survey found that roughly 40% of men in the survey had some degree of sexual dysfunction, right? 50% of those men said, I would love to get treatment, but I don't know where to go. But what was very interesting, the clincher was only 51% of those men told their doctor about it. Only 44% of those men told their partner or their wife about it. That's suffering in silence. And the main reason was they were embarrassed. Also, clinicians don't ask about it. They never, when you go to a doctor's office, and my wife is guilty, my wife's a family practitioner, and she said to me, look, I have to take care of diabetes, hypertension, OSA, and all these conditions in X amount of time, and ED tends to be at the bottom of the list. So I don't have the time to ask about it. So clinicians don't ask about it. Patients are embarrassed to ask about it. And that's the suffering in silence.
Well, look, one of the desired outcomes of this podcast, of course, is to empower people of, both sexes plus their physicians to hopefully take a more active role in this.